Hi, James Harrison back with the new series I'm starting. Today it's Sunday Stories, and what we're going to talk about today is I've gotten a lot of questions on how did you get started playing the drums. So just a quick beginning section of it. I was born in Chicago, but as a kid lived in the outskirts of Detroit in a town called Taylor, Michigan. And for some reason was always kind of gravitating toward the drums. But my next door neighbor at the time, I believe his name was Wayne Copeland, had an older brother, I think it was Dennis of all things, but who would have been in 6th grade, and I would have been like, kindergarten, 1st grade, something like that. And he had a snare drum in the backyard, and I was fascinated by that. And I'd get to go over and hit it every now and then. And also, I had a cousin named Lanny who had a drum set who was quite a bit older. And every now and then would go over there and just be fascinated at this drum set that they had. So that was the beginnings of this fascination. But anyway, to move the story forward, as a kid, my parents got divorced when I was like 6 or 7, and we moved to a small town called Murray, Kentucky, and that became home till I was 25 years old almost. So in the process of being in Murray, I kept wanting to bang on things, and my grandmother brought me this drum. It was like the stand was 3 wooden stick type things that were painted red with almost like a rubber band type thing that held them together, and a drum that sat in the middle of it. And it was a toy type thing, but it was a snare drum with a couple of wire strands under it and a little tom and a little crappy cymbal on a wood block. And so that was my first quote unquote drum. And I played that so much I broke it. So then my grandmother was big into the Sears catalog at the time, and I got this snare drum. And I don't know if it came from my mom or my grandmother, but it was a Maestro. It looked just like a real snare. It was red sparkle with gold hardware, but it was all made of plastic. Of course, to me, it worked like a real snare, and I played that so much that I broke it. And that led to me getting a real snare drum. And my mom at the time worked at this grocery store that was next door to a music store. And I got a Slingerland Gene Krupa model snare drum. And that was the beginning. And I started taking lessons then. And I think it was just around the beginning of 5th grade, somewhere in that time frame. Might have been a little bit earlier. I started taking lessons from the guy who owned the music store, but was also the percussion teacher at Murray State University. And his name was Chuck Simons. He's actually on the wall behind me here in this picture, one of my drumming heroes. And I started taking lessons from Chuck, and he eventually moved to another teacher that was from Murray State that was studied under Chuck, named Mike Ryan. And so that was the beginnings of how I got started in the drums. And I had my first real drum set came from that music store as well. It was a little jazz kit, a Premier kit that was a 20-inch kick, 12-inch rack tom, 14-inch floor tom, and it also had a Premier 2000 snare, which I shot in one of the videos. So that was my beginning kit. It had the Ludwig Paiste standard cymbals, and I think originally I just had 15-inch hats and an 18-inch crash. I didn't really have a ride to start. And my grandmother, my grandmother and grandfather were huge influences in my life and taking care of things as well. I would go to, she had a restaurant, a little restaurant called Sykes' Cafe, and in the jukebox, they had a jukebox and all these little 45 records at the time, and she would bring those home when they swapped them out. And I would go through and try to take anything that was remotely rock to me, because it was mostly old country. And at the time, I didn't really know or have any interest in that. So I would take things like the Everly Brothers, the Beach Boys, Elvis, the Beatles, CCR, stuff like that. And I would take those records home and put them on and try to listen and try to copy those beats. I was still taking lessons. Initially, my lessons started off on snare drum and learning a lot of hand stuff and rudiments and stuff like that. And then it kind of gravitated toward drum set. But originally, a lot of the drum set stuff was my own, and I would just put on the records and try to copy it. And I learned Wipeout and all those things like that. But the first song that I learned to play note for note was a tune called Who'll Stop the Rain by Creedence Clearwater Revival. And so, again, a lot of my upbringing then was a balance of teaching and going through specific books and exercises, and then listening to music and trying to copy what was there. And eventually the drum lessons became more about drum set and stuff like that. And that pretty much took me up to the point when I auditioned for a beginning band, and that's a whole nother system of or a story of life in Murray, Kentucky, and I'll get to that another story. But that's the basics of how I started. Again, just an interest in drums, and they kept buying me toy ones, and I broke them because I played so much, and I guess they just figured, and I say they, I'm talking about my mom and my grandparents, that they figured that this is obviously not a passing fancy. So that led up to me starting lessons and getting my first drum set and whatnot. And that would have been, like I said, around probably somewhere in the 5th grade, maybe the summer before 5th grade started. But anyway, that was the beginnings, and it took me up to the point of 6th grade when I started beginning band. And that's a whole other story, because the Murray school system at the time blossomed into this great band program as well. So anyway, that's how I got started in it. So, and I highly recommend to anybody to do both. Take lessons and learn to read and learn to develop the exercises that are going to make your hands and stuff good, but also listen to music and try to copy it. Of course, we have YouTube today. A lot of people become very visual oriented, but sometimes it's better to just close your eyes and listen and really try to listen and focus in on what you're hearing. And that will help you in the long run later on when you audition for a band. Nobody's going to give you a video, and nobody's going to give you a piece of sheet music and say, learn this. They're going to give you a recording and say, listen to this, and then come in. And so you can chart it out yourself if you have that experience. But just learning how to listen and copy things will help you in the long run. So that's how I got started in the drums. And the story will continue in different ways. But anyway, that's the first series of Sunday Stories. Thanks for listening.